my seat.
Hey, everybody. How are you? Good to see y'all. I'm just looking at a group of familiar faces here. That's great. I just wanted to drop by and thank everybody for their service to the city. I know it was a particularly interesting process for the council to do the selection, and I appreciate everybody's commitment and involvement in that regard. I also want to thank all the organizations. I see some representatives here for getting so engaged and working so hard over the last months. I don't know, maybe is it a year now? Probably more than a year now to both get it on the ballot and encourage the community to come out and vote in November on the initiative. I also want to thank specifically Shannon Hall and John Cooper and Marcus Floyd and Mel for working hard to get us to today. The Civil Service Commission, I think, voted today on the 3 specific job descriptions that were not already in the pay plan. So I think they made progress on that, and those are ready to move today. I think, as you look around the room, this is just about as diverse and a fair representation of the city as you possibly could have. And so I think it's a proud moment for Nashville to have such a good group of people who are ready to put their shoulder to the wheel and make this board work. I will tell you that I've been up at the state legislature probably as much as I've been any other place in the last few days, just trying to have conversations up there about how important this is to Nashville and to try and do everything I can to protect the will of the voters up there. So we'll know more about that as they do their business up there. But for now, I just wanted to come here and say thanks for your hard work. And Marcus Floyd will be the mayor's office liaison to this board going forward. And if there's anything we can do to help, we stand ready to do so. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mel. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
So I am Mel Fowler Green. I'm the director of the Metro Human Relations Commission. I have been its director for almost exactly 4 years. And since I have had now a little bit of experience wrangling 17 community members on one of the many citizen commission and boards here in Metro, I was asked to consider facilitating or being the parliamentarian for your first meeting, since there's no elected chair yet. And I was very honored to accept. I have Barbara Gunlardi with me. Barbara is our Director of Community Engagement at the Metro Human Relations Commission, and she also takes minutes at our meeting. So she volunteered to take minutes today for your meeting. So thank you very much, Barbara.
Pleasure.
Great. And I want to start by asking everybody to introduce themselves. And if you would please, in 1 minute, let's just try to keep it to 1 minute. I don't have a gong or, one of those like sticks to pull you off the stage, so do your best. But if you could just give us your name and in 1 minute, share with your fellow board members whatever it is that you're bringing to the table with us, either today or a particular strength or professional interest, whatever it is you would like to share with your fellow board members. And if you would not mind going first for us.
Don't mind at all.
Thank you.
My name is Jamel Campbell-Gooch. I work with youth, so you only got 8 seconds to really get their attention, so I'm going to be real short. As short as I possibly can. I think my experiences on the front line is what I bring. A lot of the youth that I encounter are on the fringes, and some of them been pushed to the fringes, and some of them have chosen to go to the fringes. So I work well with them, I work well with people, I work well with adults. Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Bob Cooper, and I will try to follow Jamel's example because, as I've been told many times by one of Matt's and my former legal colleagues. Brevity is the soul of wit. I'm an attorney here in Nashville with Bassberry & Sims. What interests me about this is from my experience prior to going back into private practice at the state of Tennessee in the governor's office and as the state attorney general. I had an opportunity to work with law enforcement and criminal justice, and as well as advising the state on issues of civil rights and individual rights. And I view this as a great opportunity to continue to contribute those services and to help get this very important board off to a good start.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ashley Davis. Jamil said he works with youth. He gets 8 seconds. I worked in D.C. for 10 years, so I get 4 seconds with those folks. So I'll be even shorter here. I'm a native Nashvilleian, super excited to be here among you folks. It truly is an honor. A bit about myself, I'm a diversity and inclusion practitioner. I'm legally trained. I went to Howard Law, and so I've been away from Nashville for a bit of time, but I am look, I tell you, if you could see the excitement inside of me, it's like flowing out to be here amongst you all. I am someone who's super expressive, so if I start standing up on a soapbox and preaching, you can just nod at me. I became a preacher when I was 16, so it's just in me. But certainly blessed to be here with y'all, and pleasure to get started working.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I am Phyllis Hildreth. I'm currently at American Baptist College. I also teach conflict management at Lipscomb University with a special emphasis on civic engagement and systems. And so, in full disclosure, worked with Mel Fowler Green at the Human Relations Commission for the 4 years she was there. I was part of the board when we had to go through the process of selecting a new executive director and creating the process to do that. And I will tell you that the first time it was not successful because we didn't have a good process. So Mel asked us to talk about what we bring to the table. My real passion and goal for sitting at this table at this point is to help make this process get up as soon, as quickly, and cleanly as possible so that, in my opinion, the most important persons at this table are the 7 who were nominated and elected by the community, that you do not have to struggle with red tape, and that we can get immediately to the work that brings us here. And so that's what I hope to contribute and do. Thank you.
My name is Walter Holloway. I'm a retired Metro Police officer. And basically what I've been doing throughout the years, I work with kids gang intervention program on my own. And started with children, Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts through Temple Baptist Church on Kings Lane. And the program has been very successful with a lot of children I work with. Attend college, go to the military, and they're done well. Every now and then we get one that fall through the crack, though, but I've won numerous awards throughout the state and other states for working with kids, trying to keep out of the gang and teach them how to react when they stop by the police.
My name's Adele Lewis. I'm a forensic pathologist. I work for the state. And in that role as a forensic pathologist, we're explicitly trained to look out for signs of bias and to be as impartial as we can be, and I hope I can bring that to this board.
Good evening. My name is Danita Marsh. I am a retired Metro officer. I was actually hired by Chief Turner, so I know that he's a very brilliant man. Currently, I'm into conflict management, specifically police and citizen mediation, and trying to expand those services. And I'm super excited to be here.
I am Andres Martinez. I'm Director of Policy and Communications at Conexión Américas, a nonprofit here in Nashville that serves the Latino immigrant community. So I'm looking forward to working with you all and to hopefully best represent the Nashville's big and diverse immigrant community here.
Hello, my name is Brenda Ross. I'm a retired social worker of 25 years for Metro Social Services. I am very much a community activist and glad that we have community members such as myself at the table to represent our Nashville community.
Hi, I'm Matt Sweeney. I'm a lawyer. I started out being a criminal defense lawyer, so I have that background of criminal cases. I eventually became a judge, and part of my jurisdiction was in criminal cases, so I had that experience and that exposure to police practices. I'm now a mediator and arbitrator full-time, so I work with the resolution of disputes of all type. I've served on boards before and have been involved in the drafting and adoption of rules and regulations and policies, and hopefully I can help in that area as we move into that need.
Good afternoon. My name is Emmett Turner, and I spent 34 years with the Metropolitan Police Department. My last 7 years was in the capacity of Chief of Police. I spent another 5 years in state government. I had the opportunity back early on in my career to work with Ms. Ross over in South Nashville, and looking forward to working with her again. And I just hope that my experience in law enforcement and my knowledge of the criminal justice system will be beneficial to this board.
Sure. My name is Alex Dickerson. I'm an attorney for Metro Department of Law. My job here is pretty simple. Legally speaking, I'm helping you turn the lights on. We're putting some policies in place just to make sure that you comply with Metro Code. I'll teach you a little bit about Open Meetings Act and other Metro ordinances that are in place that you need to pay attention to. But eventually, once you hire your executive director, you'll also hire your own legal counsel, and that person will be your permanent legal counsel going forward.
Great, thank you. And you were all amazing. I mean, you really stuck to the less than 1 minute. I really appreciate it. So as we move through the agenda, first I want to say if you have a question for me or any one of the presenters, would you please turn your placard around so I can see the red dots? That is the same thing as raising your hand and keeping it raised. But make sure, if you can, please make sure that I can see your placard. I appreciate it. So the next order of business is establishing quorum. So in order to act in any official manner, you must first have quorum in your meeting. Basically, that means that the majority of the board is present and voting in order for any act to be officially adopted. And today, well, so that would mean 6 members, right, for your board. And having 11 members present, we definitely have quorum today. And before we proceed then further with the agenda, I do also want to make clear that the decisions that you guys make today on policy and procedure matters, they will be binding, but just know that those can also be revised at any time if you were to take them up in a future meeting. Decisions made today, at a later date, you could put it on an agenda. If you have quorum in a meeting, an open meeting, you can then vote to change the policies. So I just wanted to get, take a little pressure off for the first meeting, that we're not drafting anything in granite that can't be readdressed at a later meeting. So the first matter for you to take up is, how are you going to run your meetings? So Robert's Rules of Order is the default procedural or preliminary procedure for Metro boards and commissions. So unless you have bylaws that state otherwise, boards and commissions for Metro adopt Robert's Rules of Order as a way of sort of running the meetings. And I'm going to use the basics of Robert's Rules of Order today, hopefully not too clumsily. But generally, the way it works is if you want the board to consider adopting a policy, a plan of action, a rule, one of your members will make a motion for that adoption. Once the motion is made, if it's seconded by another member, right, somebody saying, I second that motion, then I'm going to open it up for comment, conversation, and debate. And if you have a comment or want to speak to the motion that's on the table, again, raise your placard hand. And I will try to call on folks in the order that you've turned it. Forgive me if I mess that up. You all can sort of help govern that. And so I will let comments go until I think that the debate's over, or if one of you board members, if you deem that there has been enough debate and you just want to see a vote on the matter, you can say that you call for the question. And that will end the debate, and then I will call for a vote on the motion that's on the table. If you would like to amend the motion that's on the table, you can make a motion to amend, and then we'll go through that same process for the amendment. And if the amendment is adopted, then we'll go to taking up the newly amended motion. That makes sense. And Robert's Rules of Order, there's, a lot of other subtleties, many of which I am not great at, but that's the process that we're going to use today. So your first order of business then is I would be happy to hear a motion related to the adoption of Robert's Rules of Order for running your meetings.
So moved. Second.
Okay, great. We have a motion on the table by Board Member Cooper, seconded by Board Member Turner. And the motion is to adopt.
To adopt Robert Rules of Order as the default parliamentary procedure for this board.
Great, thank you. Any comments or conversation and debate? Great. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Great. Motion passes. That one was easy. All right. So now I'd like to turn it over to Alex Dickerson for the next section of our agenda. Let me get him on the computer here real quick.
Great. Thank you, Mel. Okay, so basically I'm going to go over open meetings rules, Opens Meeting Act issues, and some Metro Code provisions. Like I said, this is just a brief oversight. There may be lots of instances that happen during the course of, you may have a lot of questions. Hey, if we're going to have this meeting, does Open Meetings Act apply here? If you have some type of interaction you're concerned about or that you want to have, you can always contact our office, or once you get your own legal counsel, you can contact them. Obviously, if you can ask the question before you have the meeting, it's best. If there's some interaction that you've already had you're concerned about, you can always contact counsel about that, and we can give you advice on those things. So first of all, the purpose of the Tennessee Open Meetings Act is policy of the state. The formulation of public policy and decisions is public business and shall not be conducted in secret. Obviously, with the purpose of this particular board, this is a great policy, good points to have. What constitutes a meeting? It's a lot of legal information here, but basically, the COB, this applies to the COB because you are a public body that's consisting of 2 or more people. The charter allowed you to have the authority to make recommendations, to make decisions on public matters. Also, we have a Metropolitan Ordinance, Metropolitan Charter provision 11.103 that requires quorum for any board or commission to conduct business. Therefore, you meet the quorum definition. And we've determined as the legal department that the Open Meetings Act applies to all active boards and commissions of the metropolitan government. Examples of what's not a meeting. The first is not really applicable to the Oversight Board. This is more for a department subcommittee that would report to a single department head, so that's not really going to be applicable here. On-site inspections, obviously, there may be some type of situation where you all have an on-site inspection. This might be an exception to a public meeting, and then chance meetings. Obviously, this is one where if two board members end up in the same parking lot or grocery store or some other meeting, that's a chance meeting. You don't have to follow the Open Meetings Act requirements for that, unless these interactions are not considered meetings so long as there's no discussion or deliberation toward a decision that must be voted on by a quorum of the governing body. Okay, so what that basically means is this. If there is some type of interaction that you all are having that has not been publicly noticed, make sure that you're not discussing anything that is either currently before the COB or could possibly come before the COB. In that instance, you might be in violation of the Open Meetings Act. Okay, so obviously if you want to talk about anything else, you're fine, but just make sure to restrict it to not board business if you're having those chance conversations. There is an exception to that, which is if there is anticipated or ongoing litigation, you can meet as a board with your attorney to when the attorney can present some issues about the litigation. Even in those sessions, you don't want to deliberate or attempt to come to a consensus. You can just ask questions directly of the attorney. We don't have any pending litigation at this point, so we're not worried about that, but that is something that may come down the road. Public notice provisions, if you do have a meeting subject to Open Meetings Act, then adequate notice has to be given, okay? Notice is important. It informs the parties of the opportunity to be heard. It allows the media to be present, the public to be present. Public notice is not specifically defined, but it is under TOMA, but it's sufficient notice under the circumstances that would fairly inform the public of the meeting. So what are the consequences of violating? Pretty important. All decisions are void. So if you attempt to take a vote on something and it wasn't adequately noticed, that decision is as though it never existed. Also, the court can monitor the board's decisions for a year, require you to make, I think it's quarterly or semi-annual reports to them. You don't want to have court monitoring. So it's important to make sure you abide by the terms, Tennessee Open Meetings Act. There's other issues that go along with Metro Code provisions. Open Meetings Act is state law. This is now municipal law. All meetings of metropolitan boards and commissions shall be open to the public. That's consistent with TOMA. Meetings shall also be held in a suitable place in one of the buildings of the metropolitan government. Okay, so you can't have your board meetings at someone's house or at a private establishment. It's got to be in a public building. There are some exceptions to that for private property meetings if council has approved it. Right now, council hasn't approved something like that, but there is a mechanism if the board decides that that would be necessary for some reason. Commissions, this is something we're going to do here in just a minute. You have to develop a policy approved by the Department of Law for providing adequate notice of board and commission meeting dates, times, locations, and agendas. All boards and commissions abide by these rules. There's a system in place that IT has put on nashville.gov that allows for a mass calendar for the public to see what boards and commissions, when Metro Council's meeting. Basically, this just means that you all have to fit into that scheme. You also have to keep a list of individuals requesting email or mail notice. Some people prefer to get some type of communication by email or by first-class mail. If anyone requests that of the board, you got to keep a list and you got to comply with that. Minutes have to be posted within a reasonable time after they've been voted on. Usually, you vote on your minutes in the meeting subsequent to the meeting where you make the minutes. And each board or commission of the government shall make a standard announcement at the beginning of every meeting informing the public as to the process and time frame for appealing a decision of the board or commission. There's all sorts of issues that may come before you that may require an appeal. So we just have, again, one of the statements that we'll be adopting today, one of the policies we're adopting today looks to that. Emergency notice, there are some circumstances where you might want to meet in a way where you can't give practical notice such that it complies with TOMA. In that instance, that you're going to need to have significant risk of significant financial harm to the government or the applicant, and neither the government nor the applicant is responsible for the delay. There might be some instance where an applicant's specific issue can be late added to the agenda. As long as what the vote is only applies to that applicant and isn't a generally applicable vote, then you're okay with that also. Board member contact information, you may have been asked for this already, but board members have to provide the Metro clerk with a valid home, business, or mobile telephone number for publication on the website and to keep the number updated. Failure to do so means you go before Council Rules, Confirmations, Public Elections Committee, so you don't want to do that. So I think we'll be working, Mel and Marcus will be working to collect that information from you to make sure that's posted. Also, public participation. Obviously, the public has a right to attend and observe meetings, but TOMA does not grant the public the right to necessarily participate or speak at a public meeting. You may want to put some position within your agenda where you allow for public comment. That's up to you, but there's not an absolute requirement for that. Many governing bodies do, in fact, allow the public to address the board at a specific time during the meetings. And that's what my presentation is. Anybody have any specific questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. And I will add some logistical challenges that I know my own commission faces, other boards and commissions. We communicate regularly by email with our commissioners. You may have noticed that communications from Marcus and from others in Metro probably had all of your emails blind copied. That was on purpose to avoid violations of the Open Meetings Act, right? So we can avoid having a reply all wherein there's suddenly a conversation about something that you all might be deliberating about. So that's a best practice that the staff that you eventually, well, your executive director and the staff that they hire, that's, I'm sure, a best practice that they are also going to follow. So, as Alex said, there are 3 specific policies required by Metro ordinance or Metro law. Yes, of course. I'm sorry. Sure.
Move to that. You referenced emails and all, which raises the subject of public records. Alex, I don't see it on the agenda. Would that be part of your discussion about laws and policies relating to the board? Could you say a word about that?
Sure. No, I think that's a good point. Obviously, anything that's a public record includes emails. If there's some type of, one of the reasons we talk about the blind copy is because that way some board member doesn't reply all to everyone, and suddenly it instigates a discussion about something that could possibly come before the board or is before the board. So if you have some type of email communication, just because it's not an agenda or some type of paper document, doesn't mean that it's not also a public record. So you need to be very aware that those are, while you may have a conversation that's in violation, if you write it down in an email, that's obviously going to be a violation if you're attempting to deliberate or decide about something that could be before the board.
Basically, the presumption is that any record generated in connection with this board by us individually or by the board collectively is going to be a public record. Would that be a fair statement?
Absolutely, and I think it's fair to say for any piece of paper that's generated in any way will end up being a public record. There are going to be some exceptions, but the exceptions are very small. You need to assume that there's always going to be a document that comes out. If there's a document that comes out, that it's going to have to be disclosed in a public records request.
And could also be a handwritten document.
Correct.
Right. Ms. Lewis? Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Sweeney, were you first?
No, I don't know. Go right ahead.
Please, Ms. Lewis.
You were first. So does that mean that our emails are going to be subject to Freedom of Information Act requests?
Well, FOIA applies to federal law, but ours will be subject to Public Meetings Act requests.
So,
To that.
as a practical matter, and Alex can tell me if I'm getting this wrong, but as a practical matter, if your board receives an open records request, IT, our IT department, will, with legal's assistance, they will do a search of all of your staff's documents and emails. And then it's likely to be your legal counsel and executive director who will then work with you to have you search your own email and documents. Mr. Sweeney?
With the searching our own documents and all like that, is there any way to kind of limit or define that scope by having, for example, metro email addresses? And so that the emails come to those addresses rather than to cell phones or personal. I mean, if somebody wanted to get documents and they want to get your cell phone, or whatever, I can see that raising various types of issues. I've heard that's happened to a board before.
No matter what email address or phone number you are using, if it is used for board purposes and subject to or responsive to the request that was made, it's the same thing.
Right, but if it's all coming to one address,
Yeah.
then it's easier to search and collect and say, this is all, I don't have to go through my entire firm
Yeah.
email account in order to see what's responsive to a request.
Yeah. At this point, no other board or commission in Metro government has government or .gov emails for the board members or the commission members themselves. Obviously, their staff does. But I think that's something that perhaps IT could speak to, or...
And let me say from legal perspective,
Yeah.
we're very protective of personal email accounts
Right.
to the best of our ability. Obviously, we have to comply with state law, but we work if we get some type of request that we think is too intrusive, we'll have discussions with the requester about how it is we go about doing that to ensure. Because I understand, especially for those who might work for businesses where you don't want to have a lot of searching done of your emails, law firms especially. That's the one that comes to mind. We will make you and your legal counsel that you'll get will make efforts to ensure that that search is limited to things that actually apply to the board.
And I would recommend if the email that you're using is not a .gov, I would perhaps then recommend creating an email account just for the purposes of this board. And if there is a request made, at least in my experience with the commission, is my commissioners aren't opening up their email for Metro government to search. Instead, I work with the commissioners to search their own email. Does that make sense? Ms. Davis?
Yes, I just want to offer support here. I do agree, Mr. Sweeney, and I don't know the cost, but certainly if it's nominal in any respect, it certainly seems like something we wish we would have had, if you're in a space where you do have a great volume of emails. And so I'd love it if we could just hear back about how feasible this might be to have a .gov email address, but also don't want to create a mountain of work for anyone. And then my second question is, if we're responding to in Public Records, Act and thinking about that, I just wonder if there official record books that we should be writing our notes in. I know at least in federal government space they say if you're taking notes for this meeting, use this notebook. And I, again, am someone who keeps a ton of notes, and so I would hate to start to mix my board notes, and maybe I just need to go to Target. I don't know, but I'd like to be thoughtful about that. So I just wonder.
Yeah, when you have an executive director on board, I would encourage you to ask your executive director to create binders for each of you. That is what my office did for our commissioners. Okay. There's an official board book that all of my commissioners have, and they are definitely encouraged to bring that with them and take all their notes. Okay. And just quickly, as to cost for the .gov email addresses, again, that would be something that IT could answer. There is a per email charge for every email address that your department will have. Okay. Any other comments, questions?
One other practical question,
Sure.
just as we're trying to get up to speed quickly, and if we want to share somehow information to the entire board regarding, a policy that somebody else is using, so that we can discuss it at a meeting, do we send it to somebody and then them send it out to the board before we have an executive director? Since you don't want us communicating directly among ourselves, who would we send it to then have it sent out?
So I'm going to volunteer. Marcus and I are going to work together to act as administrative support for you in the interim. So I would say send whatever it is that you want sent out to Marcus and I, and we will make sure that that's done. And Metro, I don't know, I'm going to ask if I'm getting paid double for 2 boards. I haven't made that request yet. Right, I am salaried. Darn.
Do we want to make a request for that?
Ms. Hildreth.
To that point, before we move on, I will note that Metro has already very kindly set up an official.gov webpage for this board. And up to this point, documents have been published there, and many of us have been diligent about making that information known to the public so that the public can follow our work. So as we have been doing, may we continue to rely on the two of you to take not only what we find to share with each other, but my feeling is unless it is a private HR matter for somebody, anything we would want to share with each other, I hope we're going to go ahead and publish that website so that everyone can follow along.
Great, thank you. Yes, and I will commit to helping with that.
Including, I noticed when we sat down that the wording of the amendment was not in our packet today, and I hope that we can always have the amendment one on the table in front of us until we know it by heart. And so I just want to raise that. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that, and I did not know it was not in your packet. In fact, if you look with the little paper clip, we did try to get all of the source law that we were talking about today to give to you. So we were remiss in including that one. Thank you very much, Ms. Hildreth. Okay, as to board meeting and publication policies. Yes, please.
Okay, I'll just, there's 3 policies in front of you. We split the publication policy into a board meeting publication and a board minutes publication. And then there's a third policy that's an appeal statement. The good news about if you choose to adopt these 3 policies is, since I wrote them, the Department of Law approves them. And remember that all you have to do if there's something on here that down the road your new council decides or you decide there's something that should be changed, all it will take will be a majority vote to change anything. So this just essentially puts things in place so that you do have these 3 policies in place and you comply with the Metro Code.
And I believe these were sent out in advance by email. And I'm hoping you had an opportunity to review them. If anybody would like to request a couple minutes to look them over, I'd be happy to give that. If, on the other hand, you feel prepared to begin to discuss some of these policies or adopt these policies, I'd be open to a motion, though I believe we should take them one at a time. So as to the board meeting publication, which would be the first document behind your agenda.
I'm going to adopt the board meeting publication as written and as before us.
Great, motion made by Ms. Lewis, by Ms. Ross. Is there any conversation, comments? Mr. Cooper?
Question for Metro Legal. The board minutes, board meeting publication policy talks about the board. I suppose at some point in the future, the board might create committees.
Correct.
does this need to reference committees and providing notice of those committee meetings as well as of the full board?
Well, any committee meeting that you have that is 2 or more members, which will be most of them. Obviously, some boards choose to have committees where it's 1 board member and some community members. That's why I say that not every committee will be subject to the Open Meetings Act.
Okay.
But you can certainly, once their committee is established, if they're going to be subject to Open Meetings Act, they're going to need to be part of this board meeting publication statement also. So if you want to amend that, I think that is a proper inclusion.
So then would the amendment be the Metro Community Oversight Board and any committee of board members will provide reasonable advance notification? If that's appropriate language, I'm happy to offer that as an amendment to the motion.
Could you please repeat that?
I'm not sure I can. Okay, we're on the board meeting publication. Okay, so to amend sections 2 and 3 to read the Metro Community Oversight Board and any committee of board members. Maybe any committee comprised solely of board members. Or I'll rephrase that again. Any committee comprised of 2 or more board members. So I'll offer that as amendment.
I accept that as a friendly amendment.
You may, or else I need
Well,
to-
we'll take it up. Did you have further amendment to make with regard to, you're saying the same language
In
for both subsections 2 and 3?
Correct.
Okay, great. So we have a motion on the table to amend, to add the language, and any committee comprised of 2 or more members to both subsections 2 and 3. Do I have a second?
A second.
Okay, seconded by Ms. Davis. Is there any further conversation about the proposed amendment? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Great, motion passes. So now we're going to go back to the main motion, which was the adoption of the policy as amended. Is there any further conversation about the policy as amended? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion passes. And then related to publication for meetings or notice of meetings is also publication for the minutes. And that policy should follow, the proposed policy should follow in your packet. Is there a motion, someone?
So moved.
Okay. Motion to adopt, moved by Mr. Cooper. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Martinez, is there any conversation, debate?
I guess
Yes, please.
my question to Metro Legal would be, what is the policy with regard to minutes of committees?
Yeah, we can go ahead and make the same amendment
Okay.
to make that.
Then I would move to amend my own motion to add the same language.
Okay, great. Do we have a second for that motion? Seconded by Ms. Lewis. Any conversation, comments, debate about the amendment?
So just want to understand, so in section 4C, I understand the meetings are to be searchable PDFs. Just want to raise a question about accessibility. So are we aware of any other venue, right? So do we have audio recordings available, Braille, so that other members of the community can access this as well?
I don't know the answer to that, but can we table it for 1 second?
Sure.
Because we have a motion pending for to amend the policy to include the language Mr. Cooper proposed for the previous policy. Is there any comments or debate on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. That motion passes. Okay, so now back to the main motion, the policy. I guess our answer is we don't know.
And just so everybody knows, these policies are copied off of a different department's policies on this. They're general IT policies for Metro. So we didn't develop this out of whole cloth. This is what everybody else uses. So.
Now, again, that's not to say that you can't revisit this policy at a later date to provide greater accessibility if that is what this board wants. Okay? Any other comments, debate on the motion to adopt this policy? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Will you talk for a second about the appeal? Did you already talk about the appeals statement?
Briefly, just that you have to, this has to be read at the beginning of your meeting. It'll also be included on your agenda, just to kind of boots and suspenders to make sure everybody knows their appeal rights if any decision that you make during the course of your board meeting goes against an individual.
Great. Mr. Sweeney.
Just a question. What types of actions could we take that would be appealable? Under our authority, I mean, if we decide, for example, to issue a subpoena, is that appealable?
I think that's the question that the issue that we brought this up for is there might be something related to whether or not your issuance of the subpoena and their compliance with that is something that would be appealed by writ to the Chancery Court.
Although the subpoena, in order to be enforced, would have to go to Chancery Court, so I don't see why there would be an appeal of the administrative decision to issue a subpoena. Everything else we do is non-binding. It's recommendations. So I worry that we may be creating an impression to those who hear this disclaimer that there's a right to an appeal that may not exist. And that's more of a question. I mean, if we make a recommendation about policy of the police department, is that appealable?
Yeah, I understand. I hear what you're saying. I think that I agree with you. I don't think that would be something that would be, your policies are not going to be something that's appealable.
Well, I mean, recommendations
regarding
how the police conduct some part of their practice.
Absolutely. This is, and this is one that obviously you all don't have to adopt. And if you see something in the future that looks like, okay, we've uncovered the exception that will create something appealable, you can always insert that policy at that point. So this is just a kind of a general Metro Board and Commission protection that we put across most of them. But if there's nothing that's going to be appealed and you can't foresee anything that would be appealed, then you're right. I agree with you that I don't see the necessity of.
Mr. Cooper.
I think it might be useful. I'm not sure we're in a position to really make a determination today whether or not what we are going to do is appealable. I think I, for one, would appreciate perhaps some advice at our next meeting from Metro Legal about whether or not this language would apply to us. Because if it does, we certainly should read it at the start of each meeting. But if it doesn't, then I don't think we want to create inaccurate expectations.
Okay. We'd be happy to do that research for you.
And there was no motion on the table, so I don't think we have to move to table any motion. So we could move to the next agenda item unless anybody has further comment on that. Great. Alex, will you talk for a minute about the requirements for officers in Metro government?
Just that there's a requirement that you, within a reasonable amount of time, that you have a chair and a vice chair. There's also, the way the charter and the code read together, because you have the option of having a secretary or a staff member who records the minutes, but you don't have any staff yet. So I'd also recommend electing a secretary within a reasonable amount of time so that you have someone to to take the minutes. And whatever other duties you assign, obviously having a chair and vice chair, you can assign whatever duties the chair does, whatever duties the vice chair does. But that information, once you do make the assignment, once you do elect a chair, vice chair, and secretary, that information is then communicated to the Metro clerk. You have to certify those individuals.
Yes. And generally speaking, your chair will be the parliamentarian who runs the meeting. Your vice chair will take that up if your chair is unavailable for the meeting. And yeah, the secretary will take minutes unless you all decide in your bylaws to delegate that to a staff member. So you all don't have a chair. And in fact, no procedure adopted in order to determine how you're gonna get a chair. So we have not come to this meeting with any proposed procedures. I'd be happy to ask Ms. Hildreth to share some about what Metro Human Relations Commission has done, but I would like to open it up for a sort of broader conversation about how is it, what procedure are you interested in recommending to vote on a chair? Ms. Lewis.
Well, I would suggest that we first narrow it down to people who are interested and willing to do it.
So it's to choose through a nomination process?
Yes.
Okay? Great. Okay. Mr. Holloway?
I would like to know if we can make a motion at this meeting now to nominate a person for chair. Make a motion to nominate a person for chair.
I think absolutely. If you want to bring a motion to nominate somebody and vote on that today, that's well within your right to do that.
I make a motion that we make Phyllis Hildreth chair.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Seconded by Mr. Cooper. We're going to open that up for conversation and debate. Ms. Ross?
I also would like to make a nomination. Ms. Davis for chair.
I'm sorry?
Ms. Davis.
Second.
All right, so what do the Robert's Rules of Order say here?
Well, first we have to vote. We have to vote on the motion.
So, Ms. Hildreth.
I don't know where this falls in Robert's rules. May I make a talk about some possible designs here?
Yes, please do.
This is an 11-member board. We probably need to have an executive committee because it's really helpful to have an executive committee that can work with the executive director once he or she is elected and kind of do some of the gritty work that can come back to other folks. So one of the things maybe we want to think about is how large would our executive committee be for an 11-member board? For human relations, where there's 17 commissioners, there are about four. There's a chair, there's a first vice chair, second vice chair, treasurer,
Secretary.
and secretary, members a lot, right? So it gets one round. I'm thinking maybe 4 is a good number to start with, and one of the things when I was just thinking about 4 is conveniently we sort of have 4 categories of members here that were created by the charter amendment. That is, member from an economically distressed community, member from the community at large, member nominated by the council, member nominated by the mayor's office. So one thing that's kind of balanced is maybe you want to make sure that your inaugural executive committee has at least that balance because that's what the people voted for. Another thought in mind is as we're figuring out what the leadership should be. Doesn't have to be for a full year. We're all here for a 1-year appointment, but we might want to do a 6-month term and a 6-month term to give an opportunity to roll things over. So there was just some thinking that I already had out loud, and I don't know if somebody wants to take any of that up in a motion and discuss it, but that's just something to think about.
Ms. Ross?
Yes, I'd like to say our community oversight board chaired by a community person. Personally.
I actually agree.
Mr. Holloway?
If I'm correct, the motion on the floor was for Phil Hedger.
Yes.
And then they had a second one. So I'd like to close it on those two names.
So I will decline nomination to be chair at this time.
Well, then Mr. Sweeney.
Can I ask a general question?
Absolutely.
A lot of us are meeting each other for the first time. Does it work? Does it make any sense for us to have some kind of like retreat or somebody facilitate us to help to learn how to be a board and get to know each other and all like that before we make the decision on officers? Or is that something that it makes more sense to just make the decisions now? So I just put that out as a question. I mean, there's, there may be an organization that can help facilitate us, and maybe it's not the right time for us to do that. Maybe that's another step later down the road. But I was just thinking that might be useful.
Okay, well, as a practical matter, and I'm not part of your deliberative body, so you can take it for what it's worth. You are not under any obligation to elect a chair today. It's within a reasonable period. So absolutely, you could determine that you want some kind of further engagement with each other through an orientation or some other kind of engagement. I will say, as a reminder, that it would be subject to open meetings, because I think what I suspect you would largely be talking about how the board is going to run. It would be part of the deliberative process that would trigger open meetings, but you absolutely can do that. Ms. Ross?
I still say that I like to see a community person. I nominated Davis. We're all professionals, and I think we'll be supported, but we have a lot of work to do, and we need to begin our work. And I'd like to see, even if we do it on an interim or temporary basis, that we go ahead with the chair today.
Okay. So let me just, for clarification, Mr. Sweeney, you were not necessarily making a motion to table the motion on the table.
I was not.
Okay, great. Ms. Hildreth, I'm sorry, Mr. Holloway.
Since I made the motion, and it looked like that they want a little bit more time, I withdraw my motion.
You withdraw your motion. Thank you very much, Mr. Holloway. We still have Ms. Hildreth.
So I did want to observe that in the amendment, section 11.1301, support staff and personnel, first sentence reads, no later than March 29, 2019, and through a special appropriation lasting through, et cetera, the board shall be fully operational and staffed by sufficient numbers, et cetera, so forth. To Ms. Ross' point, there is work to do and there is time. In terms of even if we delayed for one meeting, would say that all of the interviews for every single one of us around this table, and even those who were not elected, are available on the internet, and specifically on the COB website. There are direct links to the interviews for all 11 of us. So if we are going to delay probably no more than one meeting, and even one meeting is tight because we have a March 29th deadline.
Okay, well, with regard to the motion on the table, it's a motion to elect Ms. Davis as the chair. Is there further conversation, debate on that motion?
Like,
Ms. Davis.
Well, first, I figured a good part of this is that I need to accept it, right? The nomination.
No conscription here, okay? And we promise.
Right, no question. I just wanted to Ms. Hildren's point, I do, and I think Ms. Ross supports this as well, I do like the idea of the 6-month tenure to allow, you know, to Mr. Sweeney's point, that as we work together, you know, whoever is, you know, voted in to be the chair, perhaps we do need someone else to change seats, and we have that time, and we are all going to be working together. So I'll pick on myself. If I'm chair, I'm going to be leaning on everyone else here to ensure the work is done. And so I just want to put that out there. I fully support that idea as well there.
Would you like to make a motion to amend the current motion that you be chair for a 6-month term?
I sure would.
Okay.
I do move.
Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Lewis. Okay. As to the amendment for service for 6 months, is there any further conversation or debate? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes. I'm sorry, Ms. Hildreth.
No.
Oh, you were hiding your thing. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so now we have a motion on the table to elect Ms. Davis as the chair for a 6-month term. Is there any conversation, debate on the motion as amended? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Congratulations. That was exciting. All right. Okay, well, that leaves, there are other officers. So, Ms. Hildreth.
I'd like to make a motion that we come to some decision about the size of the executive committee. And I would like to propose as a starting point that there be 4 members, including the chair, who's been duly elected.
And when you say 4 members,
so that whatever officers we're doing is going to come up to constitute an executive committee of 4.
so the law requires that you have a chair, a vice chair, and potentially a secretary, right? Do you have a proposal for that 4th member? Would it be, are you thinking 2 vice chairs? If you have a proposal. The first vice chair, a second vice chair, which, by the way, is how my commission is structured that way.
To be assistant secretary, I don't think we would need a treasurer at this time.
Chair and vice chair.
Do you understand my question?
Yes, I'm thinking about that we include the required chair, vice chair, secretary, and that we also allow for a 4th position that can be a member at large with whatever technical expertise is required for the work at hand. Second vice chair? Okay. I would accept that, yes. My amendment
No, let's state your motion.
My motion.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion is to define an executive committee composed of a chair, a first vice chair, a second vice chair, and a secretary.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second motion.
Thank you. Conversation. Yes, Ms. Lewis.
Earlier, you had said that you felt like that there should, 4 was a good number because there were 4 categories of people. Did you want to stipulate that in this motion as well, or are you going to back off from that? I didn't mean that in a hostile way. It came out bad.
You are also free to make a motion to amend the motion to include that proposal, if that is what you
To be perfectly honest, one of my concerns is that a community person be chair.
Okay.
And with that being accomplished now, I'm fine. So I don't need to stay with that, but certainly if others
That's fine
want
with me
to.
too. I just wanted to know your reasoning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Any other conversation related to the motion on the table, which is the creation of an executive board comprised of a chair, first vice chair, second vice chair, and a secretary? Do I understand that correctly?
Correct.
Any further conversation? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. So now, as to the procedure by which you are going to select a first vice chair, a second vice chair, and a secretary. If that's something that you are ready to vote on today, I'll accept the motion. If you have other proposals, you want to discuss it, Mr. Martinez.
Do we know broadly what responsibilities a second vice chair has?
So it's not a defined position in Metro Code or Metro Law. I can speak from some experience with my commission. We have the chair leads the meeting. If they can't be there, the first vice chair leads the meeting. If they're also unavailable, the second vice chair leads the meeting. That rarely happens. However, they are a member of the what we call the executive board. So our executive board will often have separate meetings to dig, to sort of dig into some policy matters or make recommendations to the full board. So there's nothing defined in the code. You all can absolutely decide what the role of your second vice chair is beyond just serving on the executive board, if that's something that you ultimately want to do. So do you want, is there any other proposals for how you're going to elect? Or if you would like to postpone that until the next meeting? Ms. Davis?
I'd love to have some company on this. I'd love to have some company. I just want to put that out there.
Well, I'll make a motion that we continue with the nominating process as we did before, and that can include self-nominations.
Right. Oh.
Or not.
Yeah.
You want to add that it's for 6-month terms?
Yes, for a 6-month term. So that was my motion.
Okay, so, yeah, this is the part where I embarrass myself on TV, trying to do Robert's Rules of Order, which I knew that moment was going to come. So you've already adopted the 4-person executive board.
Right.
So we have a motion on the table that those other positions will also serve currently on a 6-month term, correct?
Correct.
Is that motion seconded?
Second.
Ms. Hildreth, any further comments or conversation on that point? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Ms. Hildreth.
I will self-nominate to be second vice chair. And I will give as my reasons that, as I mentioned in my opening statement, I would like to be available to assist technically with getting this up, and it would be an honor to serve the chair in so doing.
Great. Is there a second to her motion?
Second.
Wow, everybody wants to second that. Mr. Campbell-Gooch seconded. Any further conversation about Ms. Hildreth serving as second vice chair? Great, then I'll call for the question. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Great, it passes. Congratulations. Do we have any nominations for first vice chair? Ms. Hildreth? You had your hand raised. Ms. Davis?
Just unprecedented. I'd like to nominate 2 people. Is that possible? You tell me if it's not feasible. I can pass a note and ask someone else to do that.
First vice chair?
For first vice chair, yeah.
So,
You want some drama?
You're right. I'll do this.
I would not necessarily suggest doing that.
Okay, I'll do one.
Okay, great.
I'd like to nominate Ms. Marsh for first vice chair.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that.
Ms. Marsh, do you accept the nomination?
I would like to withdraw my nomination. I do appreciate that, your vote of confidence in me. Instead, I would like to nominate someone. I would like to nominate Chief Turner for first chair.
Chief Turner, do you accept the nomination?
I respectfully decline.
This is not,
Campbell Gooch?
this is not going to be easy.
I nominate myself.
You nominate yourself.
Good.
Great. Is there a second?
I second.
Second.
Great, Mr. Sweeney seconded. Any comments or debate on the nomination of Mr. Campbell Gooch as first vice chair? Calling the question, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Congratulations. Nomination for secretary. Ms. Lewis?
I'll nominate Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Cooper, do you accept the nomination?
Depends, do I have to write minutes?
You do until you have somebody that it can be delegated to. And I don't see any reason why, if you don't have a staff, if you got somebody who wants to volunteer, can you do that?
I'm sure that wouldn't be a problem.
Right.
Okay.
You're just responsible for making sure that they are done.
That they are done, right.
Right.
Okay.
So you
Fine,
accept?
I'll accept the nomination.
Great. Any comments or debate on the motion to elect Mr. Cooper as secretary?
We're in the procedure. I don't think we had a second.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Is there a second for that motion?
I second.
Great. Mr. Holloway. Now, are there any comments or debate? Ms. Davis?
Oh.
Sorry. Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. All right. You all have an executive board. Yay.
I'll end up on this side of the
Yeah,
table.
you're all there.
Wow, all right. And with your permission, Madam Chair, I will continue being the parliamentarian for the rest of the meeting unless you would like to take this meeting.
I bet you can guess my answer.
You're a long ride, Vice Chair.
Well, thank you. Then I will proceed with your permission. Thank you very much. All right, so we also have to talk about a procedure, and we're on item 9 on the agenda, a procedure for drafting and adopting bylaws.
And I'll just say that typically, that's one of the things that a lot of boards and commissions will assign a committee to do, to take a look at bylaws, put together something for a proposal for the larger group to vote on. So if the board wanted to consider nominating a bylaws committee to start that process, that's one suggestion. There's other ways to go about it, but that is one way that boards and commissions do that.
And so you could nominate someone, you could make a motion to create a bylaws committee and then nominate someone to be the chair of the bylaws committee. There are also, if you have other proposals for adopting a procedure. Mr. Cooper?
Just to get this going then, I'll move that we create a bylaws committee, and I would move that Mr. Sweeney be appointed chair of the bylaws committee.
Okay, I'm going to bifurcate that if that's okay.
If you'd like to bifurcate that, sure.
So a motion on the table is creation of bylaws committee. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Martinez, second. Is conversation, comments, debate? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Would you like to read, and then again, your motion
My
re-urged?
motion would be that Mr. Sweeney chair the bylaws committee.
Great, and do we have a second?
He might want to say
If he
something.
if he will accept the,
I'll accept.
You would accept. Okay, do we have a second for that motion?
Second.
Great. Ms. Davis? Conversation, comment, debate? All right, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Now, I don't know what to do with this, so who would appoint other members? Would it not be the chair?
Yeah, I would assume that Mr. Sweeney would
So I
decide.
would the chair of the overall board.
I don't know, that's a good question. Ms. Hildreth?
I would like to suggest that one of the ethos of this committee is that we always honor the name of the committee, that is the Community Oversight Board, so that all committees and subcommittees always have representation by a member of the community who holds a community appointment unless declined and does not want to be. So self-nomination or whatever, but I do think that we need to be conscious of that always. Is my
Thank you.
statement.
So is there a self-nomination from a board member who is willing to serve on the bylaws committee with Mr. Sweeney? Mr. Martinez? Great.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Lewis. Either comments, debate? All in favor of adding Mr. Martinez to the bylaws committee, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Great, motion passes. And I don't know how many members you want on your bylaws committee, but frankly, I think 2 would be fine for the time being.
If they need more, they can ask for more.
That's exactly right. No, I think that's a continuing. Well, yeah, is there any term limits that, we don't necessarily have term limits. Our commission doesn't necessarily have any term limits placed on chairs for committees, so I don't think that
I
necessarily,
mean, I would assume that it would
until
be
it's done.
job quickly and then it will
Right.
dissolve or end or whatever. But can I ask a question? When you have a subcommittee that's going to make a recommendation to the board, then that's a public meeting and you go through all that procedure, even if you're just sitting down going through drafts of.
Correct.
Okay,
If it's something you're going to vote on, in this case, it would certainly do that.
got it.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily onerous, right? You publicly notice the meeting, have it in a public place. Yeah,
And I assume the same thing applies to the executive committee.
that's correct.
Okay.
Mr. Holloway?
Yes, the bylaws, once they do the bylaws, will that be carried on to the next group of people for when they get selected, or do we change bylaws?
No, that you are selecting the initial set of bylaws. They can be revisited at points, at any time in the future, once you've adopted them. Part of the bylaws will also, I would suspect, would include procedures for amending the bylaws in the future. Okay. Man, you guys are getting it done today. Great, we're on item 10. I would like to introduce, please, Shannon Hall. Shannon is the Director of Metro Human Resources. Do you want to come sit here?
Whatever you prefer. I'm happy,
Okay.
I'm here to support you, so, either way is fine. And
Well, great.
If you find it more convenient for me to come up, we can make that arrangement in a moment.
Okay, so Shannon,
Do you mind if I remove this?
no, we don't.
Thank you. Hello, I am Shannon Hall. I am the Metro HR Director. I am not here alone. You have a very strong team that's also going to be supporting you from Metro Human Resources. I have a couple of my colleagues here with me today. Mike Taylor, who's Assistant Director over Workforce Management, and Wanda Hadley, who is the Recruitment and Training Manager for our division as well. Just so that you all are aware, we have been working on this since the day it passed. So we are ready and able to be working as quickly and as diligently for you to have a highly qualified, selected staff to help you start doing your business. And we are committed to supporting you through that process. I think I'd like to talk, because there is obviously quite a bit to do. I do want to kind of talk high level about the staff and what preparations and kind of what our plan is going forward. And then I think I want to focus a little bit more on the executive director, really putting first things first and getting that position, which is where we'll probably focus most of our discussion. But hopefully between myself, Ms. Hadley, or Mr. Taylor, we're here to answer most any question you may have preliminarily about how we build the staff. So as Ms. Hildreth mentioned, the charter amendment has some very firm dates, including March 29th, which is the date by which the staff, there should be a functional staff for the Community Oversight Board to support you. I will be honest so that we don't, I want to manage your frustrations in this process. That is very challenging. It's a very challenging date to get the kinds of highly qualified candidates in place. I want you to know that we are prepared to start this process immediately and have actually done some pre-work that Mayor Briley had alluded to earlier at the beginning comments. So immediately right after the amendment passed, we looked at the charter amendment, which also outlines the 9 positions that are there. There's an executive director, an assistant director, a senior legal attorney, a community liaison, 3 investigators, and 2 research analysts. So also as outlined in the charter amendment and in accordance with Metro's charter, all of those positions, except for the executive director, are civil service. So as a result, the first place we go to start looking on how we can map those classifications is to look to Metro's pay plan. Metro's pay plan is typically adopted on a fiscal year basis, so the current pay plan that went into effect was adopted by council as recommended by the Civil Service Commission in July 1 of 2018. So the first thing we did was look at the positions and see what we could map to our current pay plan. 6 of those positions we could map to current classifications in the pay plan. 3 of those positions we could not. Those were the executive director, the assistant director, and your senior attorney. So the first thing we did is we started to look all over the country at different community oversight boards, look at the classifications that are similarly situated even here in Metro, for example, some of our senior attorneys, and actually go on and create civil service job descriptions for the civil service consideration. That's a 2-meeting process, so we developed those 3 and kind of internally routed them with any interested parties we could. Marcus and Mel were pretty instrumental in that. We obviously routed those through our recruitment and classification specialists in HR. And the job descriptions that we create that are considered civil service, the official job descriptions, are typically fairly broad in nature. So when you see some of those job descriptions, know that that's kind of a much broader paintbrush of what that position does, but a functional job description will really allow you to kind of refine and know exactly, as you guys build your policy and programs, can really help to refine what those individuals do on a day-to-day basis. So we took the 3 job descriptions we had created, we presented those to the Civil Service Commission for first consideration in January. The second consideration was this morning. They approved those 3 job descriptions, so we are ready from a foundational basis for all 9 positions. The other kind of legal caveat that also needs to be met, and a lot of these processes are going to run concurrent, is that because this staff will exist in this current pay plan in this fiscal year, we need to amend the pay plan with the Metro Council. I understand that Metro Legal is drafting the resolution that'll be necessary to amend the pay plan. It will include the 3 additional job descriptions that we had created that were approved by the commission this morning. I expect that's a fairly normal protocol for something like this, and that will go through council fairly easily, but that will be happening kind of in the background as this process occurs, and I wanted to make you aware of it in case you hear some of that coming up on Metro Council agendas, which get quite a bit of traffic. So I just want to make you aware of that process. So I expect in the next couple of weeks that will be presented and voted upon. And all that will be doing is including those into the pay plan that we currently have so that those people can be compensated in this fiscal year. So just more of an administrative housekeeping note. So I've outlined kind of, like I said, the 9 positions, 8 of which are civil service. The executive director is the non-civil service. In your packet of information, you will see the civil service job description, and even though it's not a civil service position, because we utilize Metro's pay plan, it was effectively blessed by the commission. But that is going to be, like I said, that broad paintbrush. It's going to look a little broader, so I don't want there to be concerns about it's not meant to limit you. Really, you will allow your executive director to build a much more functional job description that will align much more with your goals, priorities, and programs. So right behind that, you will see what we are proposing as the job posting for the executive director position. We are prepared to move at the rate that the commission wants us to move, to be very perfectly honest. So you as a board, we want to get as highly qualified candidates and work as expeditiously to meet any framework of the March 29th deadline as we can, but we can move as quickly or as expeditiously or slow this process down as this board deems fit. So we are prepared to drop this job posting by the end of this week or Monday for the executive director to get that process going. Even though I hesitate to do it, I do want to make sure that you understand your options, and we'll talk a little bit about pros and cons. Obviously, we can start this process. We're ready to start looking now for your formal executive director through a national job search. I will outline some of the steps we're taking, but that would be the protocol, and we've done a lot of executive searches for executive directors. Ironically, in the past year and a half, maybe setting a record for as many executive director placements as we've had in a very long time. So we are kind of a well-oiled machine getting this process going. The other option could be that we consider, or you guys consider, appointing an interim director. That would not be your, semi-permanent, and I hate to use that term. I know that Mr. Taylor is likely going to call me on that, but not your formal director, but someone who could help you get the infrastructure up. But I think they're probably, it could on the front end be slightly easier, but it may not be. It may or may not be faster in the selection process. It could be perceived as less transparent if someone just nominated someone to just be an acting director quickly. And my biggest concern, because I really want you guys to have a really excellent, well-qualified staff, is I would hate for the interim director to, as their first order of business, be hiring the staff that may not be working for the full-time executive director. So I outline that because I want, in full disclosure, to outline what I believe are all your options going forward so that you make an informed decision. But this is something that we've batted around internally as to the pros and cons, and I really do think, because we are so ready to kind of hit the ground running, that we go after your full-time executive director now. The game plan would be that we would drop that job posting and start collecting candidates on a nationwide scale. While that process is moving through, and as we start to close that candidate process for applications and then start the interviewing and calling process to get the most highly qualified candidates for your consideration, we would strategically drop a couple of other key positions like your assistant director, your senior legal advisor, possibly your community liaison, which I think in my view seems very important for this board, and then have that process running concurrent so that when you select your executive director, we would be ready as first order of business to kind of surround him or her, get interview panels, and have that person start moving through and selecting the candidates that are a part of the civil service process underneath. So I know I'm throwing a lot at you really quickly. If you have a question, I have more, but I want to make sure I'm meeting your, perfect. So in the spirit of March 29th, what could be a proposed solution going forward? Would be that we release the executive director job posting by close of business Friday, would you say, Ms. Hadley? And then have that posting run for just over 2.5 weeks. We would close that job posting probably midnight Sunday, March 3rd, which would then allow us that first week of March to start qualifying and narrowing candidates based on minimum education and skill requirements, preferred requirements, et cetera. Then from there, take that narrowed group of, let's say, 6 to 8, wherever that natural break is occurring, have them in front of an interview panel. And then from there, they narrow again to that natural break of likely 2 or 3 to 5 that would then, the following week, present to you in a public meeting, and then you would be able to interview the finalist candidates and make your selection for the executive director. And that would be scheduled the week of March 25th, and you could have selected an executive director by then. Now remember, in the background, we will have already been dropping other key job postings, so that once this person is selected, we would surround him or her quickly and get well-balanced interview panels to start making the selections for other key pieces, so that even if we don't meet March 29th exactly on a good strategic team, we'll be fairly close. I think we will have most key positions by the end of April, and then all positions by the end of May. So we are trying to be very strategic. A lot of these things are overlapping. This is our staff working at warp speed. I also, if I'm sitting in your shoes, I want to include you as much as I can, especially since we didn't have the benefit of including you on the development of the job description. We did our best. We looked at what other cities were doing. We tried to really try to make it match, because my first question was, well, was there a city they modeled this after? No, you guys are very, very unique as a COB. So none of that is lost on us, and I'm pretty excited about that challenge. But as part of that process, and in the spirit of open meetings, what we could propose is that as our staff is narrowing that executive director search, kind of qualifying who is our most qualified group, our second most qualified group, et cetera, which is very similar through our civil service process, we could have a board representative join our team, or even see kind of how we qualified candidates. We would ask for one so that we do not have to publicly notice that meeting. We would also welcome the same or a different board member if they wanted to join us on the subsequent interview panel, which typically would have a board member and then other subject matter experts inside of Metro, like other department heads. Typically, this might be a 3 or 4 member interview panel that is really helping to narrow the focus. We could have another board member join us there. And then when we come to you as a full board with your finalist candidates, this board will select the executive director. And then for the other positions, the executive director, through the civil service process with appropriate interview panels, will help then select the subsequent staff. So I've thrown a whole bunch at you. Questions, comments, Mel?
I do just a point of clarification. My understanding is the legal requirements, like having the job descriptions approved by civil service and then council, that's one thing. But the procedure that you've just laid out is not a legal requirement. You're suggesting that that's a procedure that could potentially result in an executive director being hired by March 29th. Am I understanding that correctly?
And I would say that that's a balance of our expert opinion, our experience. Like I said, we have been kind of on a tear for the past year and a half on executive directors, and this process has worked very well, especially a number of them that have a board or commission select the executive director. So we kind of like having a couple of these. In fact, having a board member join us as we kind of narrow, in the interest of time, those candidates. We don't typically do that, but I really am looking for ways to have participation so that you all feel very comfortable about our process and its transparency. So we don't typically do that, but that was something that our staff discussed, and we thought, you know, if we can have more than one member before they come before you kind of witness how we've narrowed the candidates, I think it would help to make everyone more comfortable with the process, since we're kind of moving at warp speed.
I believe, Mr. Cooper, you might have turned yours first.
Sure.
Am I right?
If I look at that description, Ms. Hall, and it sounds like y'all are doing great work on a short time frame. This is obviously a very important hire, the executive director, really key to the success of our mission here. When you post a job for executive director, what's the normal amount of time you leave that posted to get applicants? You
For
said 2.5 weeks
directors,
here. What do you normally do?
Typically about 4.
About 4. Okay.
And it probably depends on the position.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you that one of the options we have, and we always have it, we usually do not have to exercise it, but we have in the past, could be that we release the job posting on the 2.5-week schedule and see how our candidate pool looks. I mean, we're going to be seeing those internally. Are we getting, you know, I'm more interested in quality than numbers. And we can always push it open for another week and a half if we feel like we're not getting enough qualified candidates that we think can meet your needs. So that is, and it's one of those things that we literally can make the day as we're closing a posting, and then kind of re-push through all of our outlets that we're extending the job posting for another 10 days.
Yeah. And I think that we need to proceed expeditiously. I mean, that is the direction we have been given. But on this hire, we need to get this right. And if we need an extra week and a half to get a good pool of candidates, I would urge that we have the flexibility to do that, even if it means going past the March 29 deadline.
So I 100% agree with you. I would rather get this right than fast. I also want to be as responsive to the citizens
Yes.
of our county as.
And I agree, and that's
Yes.
why we need to move promptly on this. But I think also being responsive to the citizens of our county is getting the best person for this job.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And it would be a nationwide search. One proposed way to do that would be if we want to stay with the proposed schedule of that 2.5 weeks, and as we are rounding out week 2, if we don't see that we have the kinds of quality candidates and we feel like we need to do some further outreach and extend that out, possibly with the board's approval, we could reach out to the chair, explain kind of what the candidates and numbers are looking like, what our recommendations are for moving that forward, and if she finds that agreeable, then we move that out on behalf of the board, just to continue to be expeditious in that fashion.
That seems like a reasonable approach to me.
Ms. Hildreth?
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hall, for an excellent presentation. Based on the experience that we had with the experience with Metro Human Relations Commission, one of the things that I see that's very positive and comforting is that the typical duties and performance standards do seem to track the language of the amendment, meaning that we are seeking the person to do the work that needs to be done. That's not always been the case, and I commend you on that. One observation that if this could be handled with amended wording here would satisfy my concern about being, say, perhaps present as a technical assistance board member on committee going forward. I'm saying that if you get this language right, it'll be on autopilot. It's about the third from the bottom bullet on typical duties, directs the forecast of funds needed for staffing, equipment, materials, etc. Prepares and presents a public budget. Seems to be something that is important. This is a $1.5 million budget for this, and the exercise of preparing, measuring, advocating, and ushering through a public budget request is a considerable skill that is worth looking at and privileging in an assessment. So that prepares, presents public budget there, and then following down under performance standard below that, the second bullet, thorough knowledge of the principles of public budgeting. It now says principles of budgeting. I would add the word public budgeting. And that can just be helpful in sorting.
That's not a problem at all. And if you don't mind, only because I was not sure if we were talking about the job description or the job posting, I definitely have public in front of budgeting. I think that's totally appropriate. I just want to make sure, are there any other proposed edits you have at this point that for our consideration?
No, that was it.
That's an easy add.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes, one of the questions was, how much flexibility, if any, do we have in making revisions to the job description and such? So the reason why I ask is there's this organization called NICOL, I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce it, that has more kind of recommended, detailed job descriptions for a person in this type of position with specific commitment to civilian oversight, for example, that's not in here. And I was just wondering if because of the time press, the position has already been approved through civil service, and so we don't have any flexibility, or if we do and what we have.
So I would say on the actual job description, which is not the job posting, the actual job description at this point, not a ton for the reasons that you've mentioned, but we can revise this at any time. So if we need, we are not going away. We are part of, as a Metro department, we will be supporting you through this process and your staff through this process. So if we need to update this job description in the future, it is just simply before the Civil Service Commission, and those happen periodically. I have a little less heartburn from the standpoint of this is a non-civil service job, even though they technically, since they're using the pay plan, need to approve a job description. But if there is some extra language that we can put in this posting that helps to address part of those, I think we do have that flexibility as long as it's not inconsistent with the job description. And the organization you're speaking of, which is National Civilian Association of Civilian Oversight, yes, we are actually planning on doing outreach with them. Right. So Mel and Marcus have been really helpful. That's actually something else that I did bring in case people were interested. We obviously do pretty significant outreach. We have a much bigger social media presence, I should say, now than we have in the past. It was something actually we just detailed in for our Civil Service Commission this morning. But then for each executive job, we really try to look at what organizations do we feel like we could garner the best candidates and really make it specific to that executive recruitment. So the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, the Police Foundation, American Bar, Tennessee Bar, Center for Nonprofit Management are all going to be additional touch points specific for this position. So we're going to be pushing this job description and this job posting for the executive director to all of those organizations, in addition to all of our other platforms that we would normally post jobs, including all of our social media platforms, and then on Nashville.gov with NeoGov as well.
Gratitude as well for you, your staff, Mr. Taylor, Ms. Hadley as well. And thank you for the presentation. I just want to ask a question about what, again, I guess might be feasible here considering time and what might even be legally appropriate here. We have, 150 plus people who interviewed for these board positions, incredibly, experienced individuals passionate about this work. And I just wonder, is it possible that, if we agree on this release date of Friday, or if it's Monday, right, that another email goes out, BCC, to all those individuals to encourage them, to make them aware of this posting. And if it's not too much work, I'd love for for them to know that these other roles are going to be dropping as well, because I think there's some hidden talent, some talent there as well that we'd want to tap into.
Chair Davis, I think that's an excellent point. And in fact, I have a very good relationship with the Metro Clerk's office. Okay. So, having been the former Metro Clerk, I can probably get some of that contact information and put those out. And I would really, I know I'm directing this to the board because I'm here to serve you, but I'm really directing it to our community members too. I mean, I frankly am, given the response that we had on this election, which I was having heart palpitations for the council on the narrowing and selection of, I'm not really worried about getting highly qualified candidates for this job, which is why I feel like the 2.5 weeks may get us there, considering the caliber that's been put together for the COB today. So I want us to reach as far and as wide, and any help that we can get from anyone to help push that, I think is great. And I think, Chair Davis, to your point, it was not lost on us as we were discussing this today that you may like a couple of those executive director candidates, and we may inadvertently be looking at a great assistant director, possibly a senior attorney out of that group. And so for those candidates and anybody else that we can spread that news, because we're moving so fast and dropping so many of those, we will do it in a way where they will be able to make business decisions and not jeopardize one or the other by going for the top position first. But anybody who may be qualified and interested in more than one position, we're going to encourage them to apply for all of them. And that way, by the time you guys are probably considering your finalist, they will have time to also have applied for the assistant director or possibly another position and to not jeopardize their consideration with you, and they can simply withdraw their name if they're the selected successful candidate. But we were actually talking about that timing today because I do think that we're going to get quite a few applicants, and it's going to take a feverish pitch for our staff to kind of narrow, and we want to be sensitive even to that community oversight board member that may participate with us on what rate they want to do that, because it is a significant amount of work. Our staff reviews 28,000 applications and resumes a year. We get 500,000 hits on our career page a year, and we do not have a huge staff to do that. So even if we cull and kind of show through minimum and preferred qualifications and education how we've kind of grouped candidates, because you won't see like a 1, 2, 3, 4. You're going to see this group appears to be the most highly qualified in this, and this is the second most highly qualified group based on resume, application, and what they've put together. So we may be able to meet like a board member. We want to be sensitive to their time and say, let us show you what our process is before we go to the next. And typically, just so you know, when we're reviewing and culling kind of some of those top candidates, we're looking at the first tier or two. We kind of look for where that natural break is in order to make sure that we're picking the right candidates. I mean, some of that process, but typically they fall fairly consistent on numbers, but we kind of look for the natural breaks of where the qualified goes versus the less qualified.
Thank you.
Did you have further comment?
Yes.
Go.
The job description says that the executive director reports to the mayor and the Community Oversight Board. I don't see that in the ordinance. Is that something because all executive directors report to the mayor? Or why is that in the job description?
I'm not sure why that's in the job description. I will say, as someone who is in a similar position, I certainly do my best to meet the objectives and what is necessary from the mayor with regard to our services out of HR, but ultimately I answer to the Civil Service Commission. But I think
I answer to the Metro Human Relations Commission.
Yeah.
Full stop. I was employed by the Metro Human Relations Commission, and in fact, they offered me an employment contract. So if you're looking at how other boards and commissions are set up,
yes,
you could consider that.
But typically, I don't think, if there were a question about ultimately where that person reports, the fact that you are selecting the executive director, I think, easily answers that question, and it was frankly never a question that the mayor would select it. That would definitely give a different lens. So I feel comfortable that this board would actually make the selection and the employment terms for this person, and that person would report to this board.
That's right. Mr. Cooper?
Question about the process. So the applications that come in, are they public record upon being filed, or do they, that is, if we get 100 applications, will all 100 of those names be a public record, or does it become a public record at some later point in the process?
Typically, by the time it's submitted to our office, it becomes public record minus any protected information that would be on the application. So just as you go through the interview process, if we have a board member that joins us for that, you'll be looking at those applications and resumes, but you're going to have certain information that's been redacted.
But basically,
yes, it is
anyone who
public
applies
record.
for the position.
Pretty much as soon as someone submits an application, it's public record.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And related to that, I think you should know that interviews of your applicants that involve more than one board member are also public meetings, open meetings.
Which is the reason why we have a strict protocol for one board member. And like I said, I'm trying to lean as far as I can to bring and would welcome different, because I want different board members to be involved. And I feel more comfortable with that process knowing that you're going to be making the full selection as a board. So I don't want any board member to feel like they don't get a say-so in that process. You get the say-so in that process. But I would like, if a board member is interested in either one of those processes to join us, I want you to feel comfortable with how we've narrowed the candidates that will be up for your consideration.
Ms. Hildreth?
Thank you. I want to go back to Mr. Sweeney's point and echo my concern around the language of having the executive director report to the board and the mayor. Question to council. I would like for you to help us understand whether that is a requirement, and if not, what we can do to clarify that the executive director would report directly and solely to the board, as does the director of Metro Human Relations Commission to her commission.
Okay, I'll have to review that to see especially to see what your job description is and see if there are any legal requirements. I don't know of any, but I know that Ms. Hall has counsel at the legal department that may have opined on that issue before.
And I don't know if they have. I don't know if Mr. Taylor is aware.
Thank you.
Looking at the discretion of the board, and that's not changing the minimum requirements, we can make that added to the job description.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ross?
That was my second time passing that we delete from this report.
Do we need a motion on this one?
I think either way. I think
I would
without.
move that we delete the reference to reporting to the mayor from the job.
Seconded.
Seconded by Ms. Hildreth. Any further debate or comments?
I guess the way to do it is through a motion, and if it is, then I would recommend that we amend the job description and I guess the job posting, but I'm not sure whether it's both. And there are a number of things here, and so it's maybe a little awkward to read it, but let me read it and see what we have. To add the ability to plan, conduct, and supervise complex and difficult investigations, including those involving serious allegations of misconduct, such as officer-involved shootings and in-custody deaths, investigation involving a large number of complainants, witnesses, or officers, high-profile investigations, and those involving multiple law enforcement agencies or significant policy issues. That's one. 2, the ability to train, advise, motivate, and mentor new and veteran investigators on an individual level and through formal and ongoing training programs. 3, the ability to implement investigative procedures and standards consistent with best practices for civilian oversight agencies. 4, the ability to review the work of investigators to ensure that the investigation is thorough and the factual findings and analysis are sound. 6, a commitment to civilian oversight. And 10, the ability to establish investigative procedures and standards consistent with best practices for civilian oversight agencies. And this all comes from the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. One of my concerns with the general job description is that if they're going to supervise the investigators, they need to have the ability and the experience to understand investigations, to supervise them and such. And I think that kind of detailed information would be beneficial to put there. I've got some reservation of maybe we're making the job description too specific and therefore limiting those people who would apply. But these seem to be essential talents for somebody who's going to be an effective executive director. So I don't know if there's another way to do it other than putting it specifically in the job description, but I think that these are essential. So I would move that the job description of the job posting be amended to include those additional experiences or abilities.
Please.
Mike Taylor, Ms. Hall stated, the job description gives you a basic platform so we can get that going with the budget process to add into the pay plan. The commission can tailor a functional job description that can include all that. The job description that you have in front of you is general to get the ball started. We can go back and wish the commission amend the general job description at a later date and put in all that. But since this is a new position, we want to give you all the duties that a top-level executive would need to have, and through the staff, they can manage and be able to supervise all those things that you said. But we can tailor the job announcement as preferred. It gives flexibility. The board can also develop the functional job description, but going back to change the job description as it has been approved will probably slow down the administrative process to getting this in the pay plan at this point. So just wanted, we work at the pleasure of you. We can take all that into consideration, but I just wanted to let you know there is a separate process, and Mr. Dixon can correct me if I'm wrong with the administrative process for taking things to council.
And Mr. Sweeney, to Mr. Taylor's point, maybe the happy medium here in the interest of time, and I think good points raised by both. If we could take some of that substantive information that you want and actually add that as part of preferred in the job posting itself, preferred skill sets, then it allows us probably a better chance at qualifying some of the people towards the top that are really there, but doesn't disqualify others that may be interesting candidates to consider that maybe don't have every one of those skill sets. So we could, it is a lot of information to incorporate, so I would suggest us kind of paring down part of that information, and we could add that as preferred skills to the job posting. Mr. Taylor, do you think that's an acceptable approach?
Yes, ma'am.
I think that's a really great way of solving it now, not disqualifying other candidates that may be candidates that you want to look at, but also allow those people that have those skill sets to frankly kind of rise a little bit, I think, as far as their qualifications. It gives us the independent review, the opportunity to kind of have teeth and know where people fall in that process.
I'm more than glad to amend my motion to make it preferred description.
Okay, so we do have a motion on the table, a motion to amend the job description as stated by Mr. Sweeney, which you have now revised.
And could I revise that to say, maybe if we just withdraw that, and then the motion could be to, with the additional preferred skill sets, add that to the job posting. Again, we've already had a job description approved by the commission, which we can revise at a later date, but really get after the candidate job posting. We do have some flexibility there and list those in a pared down version, but with that kind of detail somewhere in the preferred skill sets on the job announcement.
You withdraw your original?
The motion.
Okay. And so you'd like to make a motion
I'd like to make.
We have a motion.
Yeah, we have a motion
we
on
do?
the floor to approve the job description as
Yes.
written
Thank you.
with the one amendment to take out reporting to the mayor, right?
Yes.
That's the pending
Yes.
motion.
Ay, ay, ay.
No, that one already. Oh.
No, we did not
It
vote
did
on
not,
that yet.
sorry.
Or they did not vote on that. Ms. Ross?
I just have a concern because, first of all, I'm just now getting it this evening and not looking through it thoroughly. And looking at his suggestions, this is just basically an overall job description, typical duties. But if we're going to be a true COB, then I think we should have some language in here. Well, we should have had some language in here. Because if we're taking out delete reporting to the mayor, then why should the person be conferring with the mayor and members of council and all that? So I just have a problem on readiness that we just now getting this today and did not have adequate time to review it.
So I do, if you would clarify, one reason for moving, so, yeah. But I just want to clarify, this board has the authority to decide how fast and how slow you want this hiring process to go. So, Mr. Cooper?
Ms. Ross, I think you raised a good question. When I read that bullet point about conferring with the mayor, the council, and other officials and administrators concerning the activities and services, I view that as we are part of Metro government. We have to, among other things, get a budget proposed and approved. And we are going to need assistance from various parts of Metro to do our work. And so that's why I thought it was good to tell the executive director that part of that person's job is to confer with all parts of Metro to help facilitate the work that we need to do.
I'm not ready.
Yeah, no, I understand, but I did just want to share that with you.
Sure. I just want to restate that we would have to center the community in all things. And so I just want to make sure that we are a part of Metro, but we also are functioning for the community. And so I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay, so we do have a motion on the table. I don't remember if there was a second.
I've got the motion for the mayor.
The motion on the table is to approve the job description, or to amend
the job description.
to amend the adopted job description
reporting to the
to remove the reference to reporting to the mayor.
And that was seconded by myself.
Oh, okay.
It's moved by Mr. Cooper.
And posting. And the posting. Yes, both.
And the posting, yes.
Okay.
Is there further Mr. Sweeney, with further conversation?
Just one question. The first sentence on there says that the Community Oversight Board's purpose is to investigate alleged police misconduct. And the description in the ordinance is actually much broader than that. True. And shouldn't it, in that first sentence, have that broader description rather than seeming to just narrow it to incidents?
Yes.
We can get there.
Could you just take out that first sentence?
Or we can expand it to be more consistent with the charter language, to make sure that it's kind of outlining all the duties and responsibilities on the job posting. Sure.
Yeah, I think it should be consistent with what the ordinance says to show its broader scope. I thought I had the ordinance in front.
And just for point of clarification, is that kind of amendment, does that require reapproval from a third party?
Not on the job posting. And again, part of what Mr. Taylor and I are saying is while we, other than things like removing reporting to the mayor from both the job description and the job posting, which is more of a quick administrative change, that's something we can incorporate today. And I don't feel like we need to bring that back to the commission. More substantial changes, possibly, and I think unless they are really necessary, that we kind of table those. But I feel like we have some latitude on the job posting, which is what applicants are going to be viewing in order to apply. And however the board would like to do that, we can probably administratively handle a number of these right here. I just didn't have the benefit of having you all together up until now. So I welcome your input.
Ms. Hildreth.
So I have a question of clarification. Can we honor Mr. Sweeney and Ms. Ross's concerns about holding open and refusing to take action on ratifying the job description while we can still today authorize the job posting so that we may meet the schedule that you suggested?
That's a legal question. I mean, this is a job description that has been, the commission will not meet again until March 12th. It will, we will not be able to have legal file a resolution to amend the pay plan if that's the case, and all amendments would have to be incorporated at least a week and a half prior to the 12th by the COB in order for, and it would delay this process a month. We would not have an executive director by March 29th.
Okay.
But I think that's more of a legal question. I am very interested in making sure we can get any amendments to the job posting without changing minimum qualifications and experience, which really ties a lot to the job description. That's probably a legal question, and I don't have the answer.
Do you have anything to add?
Well, I mean, if the job description is passed by council, then any amendment has to be passed by council too. If the job posting is not passed by council.
Correct.
Then that can be amended without having to go through those steps.
As long as we are not changing minimum qualifications, minimum experience, minimum education. Those kinds of things are typically not something that they stay consistent with the job description, and typically we wouldn't amend those as part of the job posting, the announcement itself. But a ton of the preferred skill sets, I think we could get to almost all of the ones that Mr. Sweeney raised. Ms. Ross, if there were other ones that we needed to incorporate in here, I think we have some latitude there. And we can move as quickly as the board is comfortable moving, making those amendments.
Follow-up question, if I may.
Yes, Ms. Hildreth.
Is it possible to incorporate those questions and qualifications into the interview process?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And make a statement before I yield. Of all times, this is a time when we need one of the 7 community members on that committee to bring that forward. Thank you.
Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Sweeney, you've raised, I think, an excellent point, and something that I do think needs to be revised before this goes out, if that's possible. Would it be sufficient if the first sentence below the long line read, "The Community Oversight Board's purpose is to investigate alleged police misconduct and develop recommendations to agencies involved in public safety and the administration of justice"?
Yes. Slightly. Can you read your language again?
Certainly. The first sentence would read, "The Community Oversight Board's purpose is to investigate alleged police misconduct and develop recommendations to agencies involved in public safety and the administration of justice."
Then would you strike that phrase from where it appears below in the paragraph? I mean, I would just take out the first sentence and then you're covered.
So your point is that currently the third sentence would cover all of this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Just take out the first sentence.
I think that works.
Yeah, I think that works.
I do.
Okay.
No.
So on the job posting, under just that first paragraph, taking out the Community Oversight Board's purpose is to investigate alleged police misconduct,
Just get rid of that.
Yep.
We're
Yes.
good.
So just so we have a running tally of what we have so far, we're removing that sentence. Ms. Hildreth had asked that under performance standards, second bullet, thorough knowledge of the principles of insert public budgeting is the other edit that I have on the job announcement.
I also had under typical duties, third bullet from the bottom going up, directs the forecast of funds needed for staffing and this, I didn't smith it exactly right, but something about prepares and presents public budget.
Public budget, that's what I wrote down. Do you want to just make that its own bullet point?
That's probably not a bad idea.
Sure.
We can administratively
Yes.
play around with that.
Yes, thank you.
I don't know which of these are first, but, okay, yes, Mr. Sweeney.
Looking back at the amendment that we made and just struck that one sentence, now it reads a little awkwardly. It says the board must have a demonstrated knowledge of the issues.
You don't know. Well,
And I guess it must be the applicant or the executive
oh, I see what
director.
you're saying. Or maybe, yes, I agree. Yeah,
Because the paragraph is about the board, not about.
you're right.
Right, so
If we just flip those two sentences.
I've made that edit.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, good catch.
So
So it's the executive director or applicant, whichever.
The executive director of the Community Oversight Board must have demonstrated knowledge.
Okay, so Mr. Campbell, good.
So what I was going to say is the first paragraph talks about the executive director, the one right above that. The Community Oversight Board Executive Director reports to.
we're striking that.
Yes.
We're voting on it.
Mr. Cooper?
As long as we are wordsmithing this.
Yeah, come on with it.
The second sentence talking about, in the paragraph talking about the board's powers, it says the board shall have the power to investigate. I don't think we need to have that in the future tense anymore. The board has the power to investigate.
Yep.
Let's keep going.
Mr. Campbell, good.
So to continue the wordsmith,
Yes, sir.
if we're taking confers with the mayor out, which is the motion, then I think it should also be taken out of the first sentence under post description.
So my understanding is we're taking it out, that you're suggesting to take it out of the position description at the top, that reporting to the mayor, but I didn't get a consensus on removing the conferring with the mayor and council members.
And Mr. Campbell-Gooch, I will tell you that the intention, they are absolutely different to us.
Yes.
I absolutely agree that the reporting should be concerning, and that has been struck. The confer, I believe, is in the spirit of what Mr. Cooper has described, which is, as a Metro department head, in order to advance the goals of even the department and the objectives of ours, we have to work with other departments, we have to work with the mayor, the council, and others. So
Conferring with the mayor and council really is a very common occurrence for an executive director in any position here in Metro. Ms. Hildreth?
May I say, we've had some experience under maybe 3 different mayors during our shared time on the Metro Human Relations Commission. And when there was no conferral, or when the executive director did not have access to the mayor, it was more problematic. It is an empowering, it can be an empowering statement to include a duty that an executive director will confer. That is very different, than having to report to. So we do want an executive director who can get a message through to leadership at all levels.
And especially as it's placed with council, other city administrators, it's not just held out as just the mayor, but I think really it's in the spirit of discussion and partnerships more than anything else. I will hope that your executive director would build great relationships with Metro Council that can further advance the objectives of the board and its staff and what they need to do. The council is the one that approves the budget for this board and for the staff, and it says at least $1.5 million. Which means that there could be more as a result of those partnerships. So I think in the spirit of Ms. Hildreth and Mr. Cooper's understanding, that is how we intend it. It is meant to be more of a discussion and partnership, not about reporting structure, which I think sends up all kinds of red flags.
Yes. And I would add that it would probably be of value for this person to be empowered to discuss with the state legislature. No, you don't have to say that specifically. I'm just saying in the spirit of that sentence, that looks like it's going to be a likely issue.
Right. And I think some of these, as we're building a board and a staff for the first time that we've never had at Metro, I think as we grow into this, we will be here to support you. I think you'll start making these administrative decisions on policies and functional job descriptions, and you won't need us at all. But whenever you do need us, we will come back and help you through any process and support your executive director and staff through any process that we feel like we even need to be involved. We want to be a support, but we don't want to be a roadblock. So I agree.
Is there a motion on the table?
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
There is still the single motion,
The single motion.
which I am happy to amend to incorporate all of the changes that have been discussed and accepted.
For the
If you
job
want to simply
description.
do this by acclamation, I'm not sure a motion is, or consensus, I'm not sure a motion is necessary.
Well, I feel there is significant consensus, but just for clarity,
Fine.
if you would like to, your motion is...
The motion, and I'm not going to be able to itemize all of these,
No,
but
no.
to adopt the changes that have been discussed to the invitation for applications, that would be the motion to adopt those changes.
I second.
Seconded by Ms. Ross. Any further comments, debate? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
I am sorry.
it's fine. It's fine.
Mr.
So,
Campbell-Gooch.
just for review, can we
Yes.
go through the changes that we made?
I would love to.
Okay.
I'm sorry,
Because we made a lot.
And
Yes.
Oh, yes.
'Cause we made a
And
lot.
if it's agreeable with Mr. Cooper's blessing, there is one edit I feel like in the spirit that we can agree to on the job description as well, which is reports to the mayor. So I will start with that first, and I'll tell you exactly where I am, so hopefully everyone can follow. So from the job description and from the job announcement, we will remove language report to the mayor from both. Okay? Then on the job announcement, which begins with the invitations for applications for the position of Community Oversight Board Executive Director. Right under position description, there'll be the remover of reports to remove mayor and the. In the next paragraph, under the line, we will strike the first sentence in its entirety. Then the paragraph will begin, the executive director, instead of board/board, must have demonstrated knowledge of issues pertaining to civil rights and equity and have experience with criminal justice and policy matters. The board, strike shall have, insert has. And then those are all the edits I have on that paragraph. Under typical duties, we will add prepares and presents departmental budget and some probably overarching language relating to that from Ms. Hildreth. We will then also add under performance standards, second bullet, thorough knowledge of the principles of insert public budgeting and personnel administration. And the only part that I felt like there was consensus, that I don't have all the exact language with, but I can work with Mr. Sweeney, is I felt like there was consensus about using some of the additional language he had cited as preferred qualifications on the job announcement. We may pare that down, but that would be the last kind of overarching edit on the job announcement.
You mentioned that there was something about the mayor in the job description.
Yes.
Can you put out where that is?
Yes, I will.
I couldn't find it. I know that there's a confer part.
Yep, let me see if I can find it real quick.
let that one go.
Right here.
That's what I thought.
It's another one.
I couldn't find it in the actual job.
Okay, if we don't have it, then we don't need to worry about
It's
it.
not in the actual job description.
Great, so it's just,
Right, it's just in the post.
that makes my heart sing.
Wait, okay.
Okay.
As to the point of Mr. Sweeney's suggestions, we may want to slog that out tonight. I would suggest that we go ahead and accept the motion as it is on the table, and then if someone wants to make a motion that we go through all of those point by point tonight, we can do that after we get this part cleared up.
So you're suggesting the friendly recommendation to amend to include everything that Shannon just stated, except for the preferred paragraphs that Mr. Sweeney was reading.
Let's just go ahead and vote.
Start there.
We're happy about, and then we can move on.
I'll agree to divide the motion.
Thank you, yeah.
Great, do we have a second? Second. Ms. Hildreth, is there any further debate or comments on?
Actually, I didn't make a motion. I just said I would suggest that was part of the discussion, so you don't need to second my jabbering.
Right, was that technically an amendment? Yes, I think it.
Division of the motion, and so that where now there are two motions. The first motion has to do with the posting,
And all the edits.
and the second has to do with Mr. Sweeney's suggestions for
description.
To add to the job description.
But just for clarification, mine was that it would be in the posting as well, but that it would be there as recommended or preferred qualifications rather than required. But I'm fine with splitting it and coming back to that part in just a minute.
Okay, so I think you could just withdraw, I think you could withdraw the initial motion and re-urge adoption of the job description and the job posting as amended. We didn't
We're
even.
not changing the job description.
None at all. Great.
No. just
I'm
amending
sorry,
the
I'm
posting.
messing you up. So just adopting the posting as amended by consensus.
Yes.
As amended by consensus, which does not at this point include Mr. Sweeney's proposal.
Okay, great. And I think we do need a second.
Second.
Great. Any further comment or debate? Great. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Great.
Okay.
I will move Mr. Sweeney's suggestions.
Okay. It's seconded by Mr. Martinez. Debate, conversation, comments. Ms. Lewis.
Is there any way we could get someone to make some copies of that for us to look at, since we're all here together tonight? Is there anybody, any staff available who could do that?
The eyes turned toward you.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. My office is across the street. I could run over there.
Have you edited yours?
Okay.
Yes, it's the ones circled on here.
If that's not.
No, I can go right across all of you.
I don't mean to be a thief.
I could also, well, maybe this is I have a suggestion, and you could reject it. But if you want to consider nominating somebody, one member, to be the liaison to human resources through this process, you might be able to empower them to come up with the recommendations that they bring.
Well, I was going to say, we have a couple of options here. One option I think we have that I think leans into inclusion of all members is that we can welcome any questions for consideration of interview questions individually from you directly to me. And then we can help to structure those as part of our interview process for the panel. The other thing and that could be step one, and I think in addition to that, maybe at the next meeting, with our assistance, or you can give us direction, you can start crafting how you want to approach executive director interviews, including questions. It could be that you want them to give an overview. You may want to be able to ask questions on the fly. You may want to have standard questions. So we've got a couple of options there. But to Mel's point, we can have one board liaison to us to kind of assist our office. And I will expand that to say, if you want it to be all the same person, or if you'd like to take me up on the offer of having one person that helps us to kind of call and narrow the candidate pool for the interview panel, and then another person to serve on the interview panel, we can accommodate that request. It can be two different people. That way, two people get to kind of validate the steps and the experience, or it can be the same person, or you can say, we trust you to kind of narrow the candidates to the interview panel. We can accommodate any of those. Yes.
Board, just get the tenor of the commission. We want to be careful about discussing interview questions during your open meeting. If you're trying to get the best candidate, and these are televised, you don't want to discuss what type of interview questions to ask. That's why we usually like having a liaison. We can develop subject matter questions, behavior-based questions, technical questions, any type of questions, and run that through your selected person. But, I just caution you against, sort of trying to select interview questions in an open forum. And if I'm misheard you, I apologize, but I just that's an error caution for the board.
Mr. Taylor, I think that's a good point, but it wouldn't prohibit any member from individually emailing us to say,
No.
I'd really like to see a question about this.
That's correct. That's correct.
Ms. Hildreth?
So I did want to encourage, the document that's being passed out right now were to form preferred qualifications. Is that correct?
That's a suggestion.
And those aren't necessarily direct interview questions. Is that also correct?
Correct.
As we are here and time is of the essence, and this is an opportunity for us to hear from each other and learn what our shared concerns are, I would like to suggest that we do take a moment to look at this and maybe indicate whether there is anything on here that we have problems with. And if not, it means that the remaining of the items could be processed as suggested by Ms. Hall.
Yes.
Just for clarification, can I say the ones that I suggested are the ones that I've circled? Because I thought the other ones were covered.
Okay, thank you.
And for the board's consideration, I know I'd suggested paring this down, but I don't know that we would need to with the ones we have circled. They could pretty nicely frame up a preferred section. So if you like them all as drafted, we could do something of that nature.
Without plagiarizing.
Well, this is fairly generic language for community oversight, so I think they would forgive us.
Right, and I think this is from a nonprofit that intends you to plagiarize.
They want us to plagiarize.
That's how we get in trouble.
So when you're ready, if one of you are ready, I would entertain a motion to adopt the circled qualifications as preferred qualifications for the job posting. Am I understanding the consensus? Oh, there is. Great. Well, is there further comment, concerns?
For the investigators. This is not for the executive director. These are all directed at investigators. Now, I think the executive director should be able to do some of these things, but train, advise, motivate, and mentor new and veteran investigators, that is specific to the investigator role, and I don't think that the executive director would necessarily have to have that granular of an understanding of how to do an investigation. So I would be hesitant to adopt these as is for this job posting.
Yeah. Other comments, debate, concerns? Mr. Cooper?
I think Ms. Lewis raises a very good point. I guess when Mr. Sweeney comes back, we want to clarify whether he intends this to be part of the investigator job, solicitation, or for the executive director. Because this does seem a little granular for the executive director.
Ms. Hildreth?
Yeah. I voice strong support for 1, 6, and 10. The ability to plan and conduct complex seems important for leadership. 6, commitment to civilian oversight. I would almost hope that that would be listed as our number 1. And 10, the ability to establish investigative procedures and standards consistent with, again, needs to be a leadership skill. Those are my comments.
Ms. Lewis?
I would disagree in having the executive director be in charge of establishing the investigative procedures. I think maybe you would want a role of a senior investigator to do that. But again, the executive director is not going to be someone who's had boots on the ground, necessarily experience conducting these kind of investigations.
So some sort of ability to I guess what I am struggling with here is I would agree with not at the granular level, but some ability to understand.
How about approve instead of establish?
Mr. Sweeney,
Yes.
one question that came up, are these 6 items being posed for the job posting for the executive director or for
Yes.
investigators?
The executive director.
Okay. So
My sense was this is going to be the key person, and they're going to have to oversee, evaluate the recommendations that are coming from the investigators. They're going to have to be able to assess whether the investigation is good and it's complete, and whether there's going to be a recommendation to move on it. The executive director is going to come to the board and say, we're ready to go on this based upon what's been done. And if they don't have that knowledge and understanding of the techniques where they can essentially assess and tell us that this is complete and thorough and we can move on it, then I think that puts the board in somewhat of an awkward position. Now, whether the exact wording of any of these is proper, I'll certainly defer, but it's the sense of it that they're in charge, they look at everybody, they task everybody, they look at a preliminary investigation that's come back and say, there's something missing here. We haven't done this, we haven't done this, whatever, rather than they're just taking it from the investigator and relying on the investigator. I think that the executive director in this position with this entity needs to have a real sense of it, because everything that we're going to be looking at is so significant to everyone involved. And they can't just defer and say, well, my investigator said it's complete.
Ms. Lewis?
So the point that I was making is that these are obviously directed specifically at investigators, and this organization obviously acknowledges that because this is for investigators, right? Or is it under executive director?
It was under. No, it was for it was under supervisory investigators.
Yeah, so I was saying that I don't think the executive director is necessarily going to have this, for lack of a better word, granular type knowledge of how an investigation is conducted. It's sort of analogous to my job. So I'm the deputy state chief medical examiner, and I have investigators. And yes, I make sure they're answering all of the questions that I want answered, but I don't tell them what order to ask their questions in.
Right. But you evaluate their investigation and say whether it's
yes, I evaluate it, but
so you have to understand
right.
it, and do you assign them things to do, task them generally?
Yes.
I mean, I think it's that type of ability. So if the wording isn't right,
I just feel like it's a little too specific.
I'm fine with that. It's the sense of it, not the specific words.
Mr. Cooper?
Mr. Sweeney, do you think that the point you want to make here, which I think is a good one, is captured in item 4? The ability to review the work of investigators to ensure that the investigation is thorough and the factual findings and analyses are sound. I think that's what we would expect from our executive director. And then perhaps also include number 6, commitment to civilian oversight. Would it be appropriate to narrow this down to those 2?
I think they might, with some revision to number 1, where you have supervised, complex, and difficult investigations.
Is that what you're proposing, Mr. Cooper?
Mr. Sweeney, your thought there is to change that to ability to supervise complex and difficult investigations?
Well, no, what I was suggesting is 4 and 6, and then some version of number 1. I would say the ability to supervise, even if it's not planned to conduct, complex and difficult investigations.
Yeah. I'm more comfortable with that because, again, I think we want the executive director in a supervisory capacity. That's what we would expect.
But I think four is different from that. So I mean, I think that modification of 1 and 4 and 6 would essentially capture what I'm looking for.
Ms. Davis?
My suggestion is similar to that of Mr. Cooper. The only thing I just want to add, I was coming to number 1, 2, to ask Mr. Sweeney if we add the language of familiarity with planning, conducting, and supervising, and we're not getting too granular, but we're still saying that there's some other experience the candidate might have that would still lend itself appropriate to the job. Would that meet your satisfaction? Okay. Okay.
Ms. Hildreth?
That satisfies my concern. I wanted to repeat, Ms. Ross and Mr. Sweeney were out of the room when I first stated my support for number 1. So I did want to make sure that the bulk of number 1 remained.
So basically, we're going to summarize.
My understanding of what we just said was we're going to take number 4 and number 6 as they stand. And then we're going to modify number 1.
So how would number 1 be?
I would take out in the first sentence the words plan and conduct, and say ability to supervise, and I would suggest we leave in all the remaining language, but I'm fine to tailor it back some too.
I think the remaining language is important.
Okay. So for number 1, just take out the words in the first sentence, plan, conduct, and. So then we would have 1, 4, and 6.
1, 4, and 6. Would you like to withdraw the motion and re-urge it
Yes.
Along that consensus?
I will withdraw my motion and allow Mr. Sweeney to make his own motion.
All right. I would move that we put in under preferred qualifications, off of the sheet that we passed around, number 1 modified to take out the words plan, conduct, and in that paragraph, and then number 4, and then number 6. And those be the 3 added preferred qualifications.
Second. Yeah.
Further comment, debate? Ms. Hildreth? Oh, sorry. Is there actual further comment or debate? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nays? Motion passes. Good work. Another issue left. Okay, I believe that would complete the qualifications, the job notice. Great. The heavy lifting.
And in the interest of time, since we've begun the discussion, if it were appropriate, you guys tell me if it's not, would I have a volunteer or 2 that want to serve in a liaison capacity on the interview panel and or the narrowing of candidates on the initial process after we close applications?
Mr. Campbell-Gooch.
I'd like to volunteer for the interview panel, but I would also like for someone else, so 2 of us for the interview panel. Just 1. I would like to volunteer for the interview panel.
Ms. Ross?
I volunteer for the other piece.
So the narrowing of candidates?
Narrowing of candidates.
And just because that can be a little daunting, I expect a lot of applicants. I'll work directly with you to make sure that we are meeting your needs. But anticipate probably that first full week of March for that. And Mr. Gooch, the 2nd and 3rd week of March, we will try to give as much. It will probably be most of a day, Mr. Campbell-Gooch, or possibly 2 half days on those interviews, because I anticipate that you'll be interviewing a number of candidates with our panel. if that's okay.
Mr. Martinez.
Can you say it again, how this whole process is going to work?
Sure. Yep. So, either by close of business Friday, first thing Monday, I think our goal is close of business Friday, and you guys have given us great direction on our job announcement. We will drop the job announcement for executive director. That will be open and close Sunday midnight, March 3rd, unless we feel like we don't have enough quality candidates. If so, we'll contact the chair, kind of assess the situation with her, and then with her approval, possibly extend that posting for up to another 10 days. But assuming that that doesn't happen, or either way, shortly thereafter, we'll close the candidate process. We'll start evaluating the resumes and applications of everybody who's submitted for executive director. We will work with Ms. Ross to help ensure that she is comfortable and helping us on our methodology for narrowing and qualifying those candidates consistent with the job announcement that you've just now approved. Following that narrowing of candidates, we expect probably the top 8 to 10 to present in front of an interview panel, for which you will have Mr. Campbell Gooch serve as your liaison representative, along with a couple other Metro executives. We try to make sure it's very balanced and that there are people who have some experience in this field. From there, I expect that interview panel will narrow to your top 2, 3, 4, or 5, wherever that natural break of qualified candidates occurred. Those candidates will then be presented in a public meeting to the full Community Oversight Board for final interviews, presentations, whatever we decide that process to be, and your final selection. Our goal would be that we have that by that last week of March, which is the week of March 25th. If we can do it sooner, we'll do it sooner. But while that process is happening, we will, as that interview process and that is going through, we will drop the candidate postings for the assistant director and your senior legal advisor at the same time. And then strategically, we will start dropping the other key positions to start building the staff.
You mentioned our ability to suggest interview questions via email, and that would be so that
you
could ask them? Or
you can send them directly to Marcus or directly to me, whichever you prefer. I do have business cards. I'll make sure that you all have my business cards at the end of the meeting. Either one's comfortable, and I'll just make sure that Marcus forwards those to us, and then we'll try to find appropriate ways to incorporate those, either for your consideration as a board or on the interview panel process.
And because this process would be empowering individual board members to act on your behalf, I would welcome a motion to adopt this procedure and thus empower Mr. Campbell Gooch, Ms. Ross, and potentially the chair to extend the deadline for posting.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Further comment, debate, conversation? Mr. Martinez.
Will we be updated? How will we be updated on the process? Like, when do we get to the interview stage? Will we know at any point? Or
If you want to contact me directly at any time, I'll tell you the exact update of where we are at any time. I'll just ask that you contact me individually so we don't violate open meeting. I'm happy to give that update at any time. Myself, Ms. Hadley, or Mr. Taylor are happy to give you an update at any time where we are in the process.
Great.
But know that we're thinking probably that first full week of March, we're going to be narrowing candidates. That second or third week, we're going to be interviewing candidates. And then our goal is to have the top finalists in front of you for consideration by that last week in March.
Ms. Hildreth.
I would just ask that any process updates that may be public be posted directly to our website.
Absolutely.
That become the default mechanism for how we understand and help the rest of our community understand what the process is at all times. Thank you.
We will do our best.
Thank you.
Further comment, debate? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Yes. I think that's it. I think we did it.
This is great.
Thank you, Ms. Hall.
Great job.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have 2 remaining issues on the agenda. One, any announcements? Ms. Hildreth?
I have a question. I just want to commend everybody involved for structuring what was an amazingly competent and effective meeting. The only thing I don't see, and if I missed it, is what is our regular meeting date?
Yeah.
Is it the second Tuesday of the month, or, because I thought I heard an assumption that we were coming back on March 12th, and I just wondered, did we cover that?
That's up to you. Mr. Sweeney?
To get up to speed as quickly as we need to, do we need to meet more frequently than a board would for the first few meetings, just to get everything in line? I'm just asking.
It's common for boards and commissions they set their own meeting schedule, right? So mine meets once a month. There are other boards and commissions that only meet quarterly. But at this point, you are fully empowered to determine how often you want to meet. Mr. Cooper?
I guess the main items we have pending before us would be the selection of an executive director and then the bylaws. Would our next meeting date be dependent upon when those are ripe for consideration?
I would suggest that proposed bylaws that Andres and I could probably, depending on your schedule, maybe have something for the board's consideration in 2 weeks. I mean, I presume that there's a set of bylaws for some other board, commission that we can start as a starting place and then work off Nicole and maybe have something relatively quickly for consideration.
Just remember, you'll have to publicly notice your meeting with him.
But how much notice? 3 days? Is that what it is?
It's not defined, but
reasonable. I think.
Reasonable. Yeah. So I think that the way Nashville.gov does, you post it on the Friday before. So I would recommend more time than that. But I can give an answer for a recommended minimum amount of time. I can have the answer for you tomorrow.
We aim for 5. 5 days, 3 days if push comes to shove.
What does your schedule look like for next Friday to get to Friday week?
Check my calendar. And you said to meet next Friday?
Yeah, a week from this. So that's the 22nd. Yeah, the 22nd.
That's fine with me.
Okay. Morning, afternoon, what works?
Afternoon is better.
Okay. 2 o'clock?
2 o'clock.
Can we get a notice out for 2 o'clock on Friday, the 22nd, for the purpose of considering bylaws subcommittee?
Yes, and between Marcus and I, we will follow up and make sure that we have an agenda set for you that you would like, and we can help you notice that.
Pick a room for us over here someplace that we could come meet. All right, we'll do that.
Okay, great.
And that's the two of you, not the whole
Just the
board.
2 of us.
That's right, though, I will say, it's an open meeting, so any of you can attend that you would like. Ms. Hildreth?
I'd like to make a recommendation, short of a motion at this point, that we meet every 2 weeks for the next 4 sessions, so that would put us at February 26th, when I guess we could hear from the Rules Committee. Then March 12th, so that could be a short meeting, but a check-in as to the status of the selection. And then March 26th would be right after the 25th day, the day that you have set for the interviews. So those next 4 meetings would be tightly aligned with moving us along some critical milestones for the next 2 months. And that we put on the agenda on March 26th to consider what our meeting schedule would be going forward.
I'd second that.
Okay, that was a motion.
Used everything.
It sounded pretty good when it came out of my mouth, right?
We have dates, we didn't set time.
We didn't set times. How is this working? 4 o'clock here?
Really, again, that's up to you guys, so. The meeting space is going to be a question. Am I right?
Figure out something.
Huh?
Or we can figure out something.
Yeah.
It might not be here, but.
Right.
Okay.
We can't we haven't seen the calendar for this room, for instance, and in fact, this room, we don't necessarily control it. Metro doesn't necessarily control the calendar for this room. But Marcus and I will work with you all to find an appropriate space. Marcus?
Sorry, can we loop? I have tried to make sure that we capture all of the meetings as best as possible, working with Metro Nashville Network, and so if we can just address them and their availability to capture these meetings going forward, I think that would be helpful or beneficial.
So my understanding, you said the 26th of this month, and then March 12th and March 26th.
Correct.
At 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock,
At somewhere on a Metro-owned property. And I don't think that needs a motion. I mean, Ms. Ross. Second?
Second.
Right. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you, guys. It was a real honor. Thank you for your patience with me.
Congratulations, Sherry. You got an amazing.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.